Delivery girl donated blood to a dying stranger unaware. He was a ruthless mafia boss. The wind off the Harbor Point docks was a special kind of cold. It didn't just bite, it chewed, carrying the metallic tang of the shipyards and the deep, wet smell of the Atlantic. It was a wind that knew how to find the seams in cheap thermal gear, and it was currently trying to peel Avery Kwan off her electric scooter. It was 11:52 p.m. Avery, 24 years old, was fighting that wind to finish her last run. The glowing green thermal bag strapped to her back was empty of food. This last stop was a document satchel for the medical labs, a side hustle to her food delivery gig. Both jobs barely kept the lights on in the Dockview apartment she shared with her unemployed father, and they did nothing to touch the mountain of student debt that felt like a second, heavier passenger on her scooter. The storm was getting worse. Rain slicked the cobblestones of the Pier District, turning the streetlights into greasy, diffused smears of yellow. She chose the access road along the water. It was faster, emptier. Tonight, that was a mistake. A sound split the howl of the wind. It was not thunder. It was the shriek of high-end tires failing, followed by the catastrophic, deafening crunch of metal collapsing on metal. Avery slammed her brakes, the scooter fishtailing dangerously. Ahead, under the flickering dock lamps, a maroon sedan was accordioned against a concrete median. It had been hit hard, spun out. As Avery watched, a black SUV that had been running parallel to it accelerated, its taillights vanishing into the rain without a second glance. It had the distinct shape of an interception. Not an accident. Avery's first instinct was to leave. This was Harbor Point. You did not see things at night, especially not things involving black SUVs and ruined sedans on the pier road. Getting involved was how you ended up as pier chum. But then she saw movement. The driver's side door of the sedan was bent, but it pushed open a few inches. A man was forcing himself out, half crawling, half falling onto the wet pavement. Even from a distance, the darkness staining his chest was unmistakable. It was too much blood. Avery cursed, the words stolen by the wind. She kicked down her scooter's stand, ripped the document bag from her back, and threw it to the ground. She ran. He was older than her, maybe 38 or 40. He was trying to push himself up, but his right arm wouldn't obey. He was wearing a black suit, but the fabric was rich. With a subtle embroidery she couldn't make out in the dark. A custom timepiece on his wrist glinted. The bullet had gone through near his right shoulder, a messy, arterial bleed that soaked his suit and steamed in the cold air. He was losing blood fast, but his eyes, when they locked on her, were terrifyingly alert. They were dark, analytical, and they looked at her not with the panic of a victim, but with the cold assessment of someone pricing an asset. Avery knelt, hands hovering. "You're hit! I'm calling for help!" His voice was a low rasp, gravel and authority. "No HMSB." Avery froze, her phone in her hand. "What? No Harbor Point Municipal Security Bureau," he commanded, his breath catching. "Just an ambulance. Now." Annoyance, sharp and inappropriate, spiked through Avery's fear. This man was dying on a Tuesday night and still thought he could give orders. "You're bleeding out," she snapped. "The car," he breathed, ignoring her. Avery looked. A thin wisp of smoke was curling from under the crumpled hood. The smell of gasoline suddenly cut through the salt air. She grabbed the front of his ridiculously expensive suit. "We have to move." She hooked her arms under his, using her leverage as a delivery driver, all back and legs, to drag him away. He was heavy, dense muscle, and he hissed in pain, but he used his good leg to help. They cleared the sedan by 20 feet when the first sparks ignited the leaking fuel. The car went up with a sudden whoosh, illuminating the docks in a flash of orange light. They made it to St. Lucia Harbor Hospital in an ambulance he hadn't wanted and she'd insisted on. The paramedics had worked on him, but he drifted, his eyes never quite closing. Now, in the harsh, fluorescent-lit trauma bay, a young doctor looked grim. "He's lost a lot of blood. His type is extremely rare. Our bank is low, critically low." Avery's own blood ran cold for a different reason. She'd spent 2 years as a phlebotomy tech to pay for prerequisite classes she couldn't afford anymore. She knew the types. "What is it?" The doctor named it. Avery stared at the man on the gurney. The universe had a sick sense of humor. "That's my type," she said. The doctor's head snapped up. "Are you sure?" 100%, Avery said. "I'm a universal donor for platelets, but my whole blood is that. Hook me up." She didn't even know his name. But as she sat in the chair next to his gurney, the nurse finding her vein, she watched him. Even now, barely conscious while nurses cut away his suit, his eyes were not closed. They were scanning the entrance to the ER, tracking the movement of the orderlies. Looking, she realized, for the next threat. This was not an accident. This was a man who expected shooters to finish the job. Her blood, warm and alive, flowed through the clear tube and into the stranger's arm. "You're saving his life," the doctor said, passing by. "If you hadn't been here, if you hadn't matched, he wouldn't have made it through the night." Avery just nodded, feeling tired, feeling the familiar lightheadedness of donation. She felt a strange, unwelcome connection to the man, a responsibility that went beyond just being a witness. She left near 3 a.m. The rain had stopped, but the cold was deeper. Her phone was a disaster, 10 missed notifications from the delivery app, a warning for an incomplete route, and a message that her shift bonus was forfeited. She was soaked, exhausted, and probably getting fired. She walked out into the empty, clean-swept streets of Harbor Point, pulling her thin jacket tight, completely unaware that she had just poured her own lifeblood into Dante Serrano, the man who controlled every container, every shipping lane, and every high-stakes shadow game on the Harbor Point waterfront, miles above her, on the wind-swept roof of the hospital's private wing. A different man stood. He had a military bearing and a precise goatee. Bishop Reddick pressed a secure phone to his ear, his voice calm against the wind. "The boss is alive," Bishop reported. "The car is gone, but he's stable. The hospital found a donor." He paused, looking at the file on his tablet. The donor was a delivery girl. Name Avery Kwan. Avery woke up 5 hours later to the screaming alarm of her primary phone, the one that paid the bills. Her head was fuzzy from the blood donation, and her muscles ached from dragging a grown man out of a car wreck. The app HarborDash was flashing a bright, aggressive red notification. Account suspended, trip abandonment. A cold knot of panic tightened in her stomach. Colder than the pier wind, that was it. She was fired. She was trying to figure out how to frame an appeal. "Sorry, I abandoned the medical satchel to save a man who was actively bleeding to death," when the screen flickered. 10 minutes after the suspension, a new notification popped up. Violation cleared, bonus reinstated. A follow-up email from support landed in her inbox. "We apologize for the system error. Miss Kwan, your dedication is valued." The signature was not from any of the regional managers she knew. It was just a generic corporate title with a name that felt fabricated. She brushed it off as a lucky glitch and went to check the household budget. Her father was still asleep, the smell of stale beer hanging in the living room of their Dockview housing unit. She logged into the Harbor Point utility portal to see how much time she had before they cut the power. The screen loaded, balance $0, status paid in full. Your account is prepaid for the next 3 months. Avery stared, her blood turning to ice. That was impossible. She was 3 weeks late on the last payment. She clicked the payment history. A transfer had been made at 6:05 a.m. that morning. Anonymous, she knew instantly where it came from. They had not just taken her blood at the hospital, they had taken her name, her address. They had run her file. The strange relief from the app was not a glitch, it was an intervention. Her phone rang. This time, it was an unblocked local number. "St. Lucia Harbor Hospital," she answered, her voice tight. "Is this Miss Avery Kwan?" A polite, crisp voice asked, "We are calling to schedule your complimentary follow-up assessment after your generous donation." Avery looked at the peeling paint on her wall. "I'm fine. I just need sleep." "It is standard procedure," the voice insisted, almost too smooth. "We have scheduled you for this afternoon at the Arcadia Center. 3 p.m. A car will be waiting. Avery frowned. The Arcadia Center that was not St. Lucia. That was a spire of reflective blue glass in the financial district, a place where athletes and billionaires went for recovery, not where Dockview delivery drivers got post-donation orange juice. I don't think I can. The consultation is mandatory to ensure your well-being. Miss Kwan, we insist. The line clicked dead. We insist. Avery decided to go. She was not going to be summoned, but she needed to look this problem in the eye. Old habits from growing up in the Harbor Point slums kicked in. She dressed in her cleanest jeans and work boots, but first, she grabbed her burner phone, an old, non-smart flip phone she kept for emergencies, and slipped it into the inner pocket of her jacket, shutting it off. You always had a way out. Arcadia was silent and smelled like expensive, sanitized air. A woman in a sharp gray suit met her in the lobby, knew her name without asking, and escorted her to a private elevator. They did not stop at a clinic floor. The elevator opened directly onto the 23rd floor, a sprawling private recovery suite. It was not a hospital room, it was a luxury apartment, and in the center, sitting in a chair, not a bed, was the man from the sedan. He was awake, he was alert. His right shoulder was heavily, professionally bandaged over a clean black t-shirt. Standing near the window, motionless as a statue, was the man Avery had seen on the hospital roof, the one with the military bearing and the precise goatee. He watched Avery with the same unnerving stillness as the man in the chair. The man in the chair gestured for the attendant to leave. The door clicked shut, leaving the three of them alone. "I am Dante," the man said. His voice was no longer a rasp. It was deep, controlled, and resonated with power. "You gave me your blood. I do not forget." He did not offer a last name. He did not offer a job title. He did not need to. Hanging on a valet stand near the door was his suit jacket from last night, now cleaned and repaired. On the breast pocket, embroidered in subtle, dark gray thread, was a small, coiled sea serpent. Every soul in Harbor Point, from the lowest dock worker to the mayor, knew that symbol. Avery's anger finally overrode her fear. "You dug into my life," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "My job, my father's utility bills." Dante's expression did not change. It was not apologetic, it was factual. "I have to ensure the person carrying my blood is not sleeping on the street." The man by the window, Bishop, stepped forward. He held out a small, thin card, like a high-end credit card, but made of brushed black metal with a visible chip. "If you find yourself in trouble," Bishop said, his voice flat, "tap this card to any phone. We will come." Avery looked at the card. This was the moment. She could take it and be in their debt, or refuse and be in their path. She hated the feeling, but she hated the idea of being helpless more. She took the card, her fingers brushing his. It felt cold. "I don't want your help," she said. "I want to be left alone." Dante rose from his chair, a wince of pain quickly mastered. He was taller than she had realized. He walked closer, close enough that she could smell the antiseptic and the faint, expensive scent of sandalwood. "That is no longer an option," he said, his voice dropping. It sent a chill straight down her spine. "That night, it was not just my enemies who shot at me. There is someone inside my own organization who wants me dead. And now, there is someone in this city who wants to know the name of the girl who kept me alive." He stared at her, the intensity of his gaze pinning her. "They will come looking for you." That night, the threat stopped being theoretical. When Avery returned to her apartment building in Dockview, something was wrong. She smelled new plastic and drywall dust in the hallway. She looked up. The building's single, ancient security camera, which had pointed at the broken elevator for 5 years, was gone. In its place was a new, high-definition dome camera, and it was aimed directly at the door of her apartment. Her landlord, Mr. Jankowski, was sweeping the hall. "New toys, huh?" Avery asked, trying to sound casual. "Duh," he said, not looking up. "Is good. Some new company. Harborfront Security. They pay to install for free. Good promotion." Avery went inside and locked her door, her heart hammering. She looked up Harborfront Security on her laptop. The company did not exist. The camera felt like a spider on her neck for 3 days. Avery tried to live normally. She ran deliveries. She checked on her father, but the world felt tilted. The new camera in her hallway was a constant, humming reminder that she was no longer just a resident. She was a target. On the 3rd day, the abstract threat became concrete. She was returning from a lunch run when she saw the commotion at the entrance to her building. 3 men in matching windbreakers with a fake Harbor Point Dock Warehouse logo were backing her father against the mailboxes. They weren't from any city authority. They were tonnage. Broad shoulders, dead eyes, and the casual menace of men who get paid to break things. "We're just checking the inventory tax. Old man," one of them was saying, shoving her father's shoulder. "Sometimes people store things in these units that they don't pay duty on. We just need to check your apartment." "I have nothing," her father protested, his voice thin with fear. Avery saw it clearly. They were targeting him. To get to her. She didn't shout, she didn't run. She fumbled in her pocket for her real phone, her thumb pressing the cold, black metal card Bishop had given her against the back of the case. She held it there for a 3 count. Nothing happened for the first minute. The men had spotted her and were leering, recognizing a new target. "Ah, the daughter. Maybe you can pay your father's late fees?" Avery just stood on the pavement, her heart a trip hammer. She counted. 6 minutes, exactly 6 minutes later, an unlisted all-black sedan, the kind that looked like it weighed 10,000 pounds and had no chrome, glided silently to the curb. 2 men in identical black suits got out. They didn't run. They simply moved, one to the left, one to the right, flanking the 3 thugs. No words were spoken. No guns were drawn, but the shift in power was absolute. The thugs, who had been predators a moment before, suddenly looked like prey. Their faces went pale. They knew. Avery realized what those suits and that silent car represented. The first suit just nodded toward the sedan's open rear door. The 3 men, without a word, were escorted into the car. It drove away as silently as it had arrived. The entire encounter, from the car's arrival to its departure, took less than 40 seconds. Her phone buzzed. A video call request. She accepted. Dante Serrano's face filled the screen. He was not in a hospital. He was in a boardroom. Dark wood paneling behind him. The city's skyline visible through a window. He still looked pale, but his eyes were sharp. "I told you," he said, his voice a low hum through the speaker. "You are on the map." The adrenaline and the fear boiled over into rage. "I am on the map because of you," Avery snapped, her voice loud enough for people on the street to turn. "You and your world, this is your fault. You have to get me out." Dante was silent for a beat, his expression unreadable. "I cannot get you out. You know what I am. You know what you did. The only way to get you off the map is to pull you onto my side of it, where the lines are drawn by me." "What does that mean?" "I move into your fortress. I am not one of your prisoners." "It means," Dante said patiently, "that I am offering protection. I will put you in a place I control. I will put my people on your father. Anyone wants to touch you. They have to go through me. That is the only way." "No." The word was out before she could stop it. "I will not be a charity case hiding in a criminal's penthouse." He almost smiled. It was a cold, tiny movement of his lips. "Good. Then you will work. Serrano Maritime Logistics. It is one of my shell companies. You will be a logistics liaison. You will be paid, and you will be safe." They argued for 10 minutes, a tense negotiation on a city sidewalk. Avery fought for every scrap of her independence. Finally, they reached a compromise. 2 weeks. She would work for his company for 2 weeks, as a civilian consultant, using her knowledge of the city's delivery routes. In exchange, he would provide 24-hour, discreet protection for her father at an off-site location, and he would not, under any circumstances, touch her personal accounts or her life again without her permission. Bishop picked her up the next morning. The office was not some grimy warehouse. It was the 47th floor of the Harbor Point Spire, the tallest building in the city. The sign on the glass doors read Serrano Maritime Logistics, inside. It was a blur of high-tech screens, operators monitoring shipping routes, and quiet, intense professionals. It looked like a high-frequency trading firm, not a criminal enterprise. "The floor below," Bishop explained in his flat monotone as they walked, "is our private casino, high rollers only. The logistics firm provides the perfect cover for cash flow analysis and client management. We move data, we move cargo, we move money." Dante's real office was in the back, overlooking the entire harbor. He was there, standing over a light table, talking to a woman with fiery red hair pulled into a severe bun and a suit that looked sharper than a razor. Dante nodded at Avery. "This is Avery Kwan. She will be assisting us." The woman, Mara Quinlan, looked Avery up and down once. It was not a welcoming gaze. It was a cold, instant calculation, the kind of look a queen gives a commoner who has just been invited to the king's table. It was pure, undiluted assessment, and Avery felt the unmistakable sting of future rivalry, even though nothing had happened. "Miss Kwan," Mara said, her voice like dry ice. "Welcome." Dante ignored the tension. He pointed to a large, complex schematic on the light table. It was a map of the pier road where he had been shot. "This is where I was hit," he said, tapping the glass. "The trajectory analysis shows the primary shots came from a blind on the roof of Warehouse 6. He looked directly at Avery. "Warehouse 6 is my property. The access route I used that night was known only to 3 people in my inner circle. My security detail was redirected to a false alarm 30 seconds before I arrived." Avery felt the implication. "The leak is inside," she said. "The leak is inside," Dante confirmed, his voice flat. He was running a corporation built on loyalty, and he had been betrayed. Avery watched him as he turned to his console, his voice becoming cold steel as he gave orders. He was decisive, quick, and utterly ruthless. He was not a brute. He was a general. She saw, in those few hours, that he never touched narcotics, never dealt in human trafficking. He was a controller. He controlled the docks, the unions, the cargo, and the games of chance. He had rules, but God help anyone who broke them. At the end of the day, Bishop escorted her to the elevator. Dante stopped them. He walked Avery to the door, waiting until Bishop was a few steps away. He spoke quietly, his voice meant only for her. "I did not bring you in to lock you up," he said, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "I brought you in to make protecting you easier. It is a very large organization, Miss Kwan, and a target on your back is easier to see than one on mine." He paused. "Do not make me choose the hard way." Avery was on the 47th floor, tracing cargo manifests when the world dissolved into chaos. Bishop, who had been monitoring a bank of security screens, suddenly stiffened. "What is it?" Avery asked. Bishop didn't answer. He just pointed. On one of the smaller screens, a live feed from the Arcadia Center, a white transport van, the kind used for medical equipment, was parked in the ambulance bay. But the men coming out were wrong. They were wearing black tactical gear over medical scrubs, with NSMD stenciled in white on their backs. "National Syndicate Mitigation Division," Avery read, confused. "Are those feds?" "Those are not feds," Bishop said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. He was already moving, keying his microphone. "Lockdown. Send the extraction team. They're hitting Arcadia." The men on the screen moved with military precision, disabling the private security at the entrance without firing a shot, using silenced weapons. They were inside. Avery's eyes darted to the internal feed Bishop pulled up. Floor 23, Dante's suite. Dante was not there. Alarms were flashing. Bishop switched feeds, catching Dante, flanked by 2 of his own men, in the concrete stairwell. He was still in a t-shirt and recovery pants, his shoulder heavily wrapped. He was not 100%. He was trapped. The false federal team was moving up, clearing floors systematically. Dante's men were being outmaneuvered, pinned down. Avery watched, her stomach churning. As the feed showed the NSMD team converging on the stairwell exits, Dante was being herded toward the east wing. Avery saw him on camera, leaning against the wall, his breath visible. He was being pushed toward the fire escape on the roof. It was a trap. "They're flushing him out," she whispered. Her medical training screamed at her. He was still weak from blood loss. His shoulder was a fresh wound. He couldn't fight them all. "Bishop, where does the East Wing lead?" Avery demanded. "Roof access. It's a kill box. They'll have a sniper." Avery's mind raced, not as a strategist, but as a delivery driver. She knew these high-rises. She knew how they were fed. "What about the service shafts, the kitchens, the dumbwaiters?" Bishop looked at her, confused by the question. "Irrelevant. They're locked down." "Not from here," Avery said. She ran to the building schematics Bishop had been studying. She found Arcadia. She found the service core. She saw the large, commercial-grade food service elevator that ran from the lobby kitchen up to the private suites. It was an old-world luxury feature, and it was separate from the main elevator banks the attackers were controlling. She was already running for the door. "Keep him on the 23rd floor. Tell him to get to the service pantry. I'm going." "You are not," Bishop commanded, grabbing her arm. "He'll be dead before your team gets through the perimeter," she yelled, ripping her arm free. "You protect him your way. I'll do it mine." She didn't use the elevator. She took the stairs, flying down 47 flights in a blur of adrenaline, her delivery route knowledge of the spire's back end guiding her. She burst into the subterranean service tunnel that connected the spire to the adjacent buildings. A private walkway for billionaires and, apparently, for her. She got to Arcadia's basement level. The kitchen was in chaos from the alarms, staff huddled in a corner. Avery vaulted the steel counter, found the dumbwaiter, and hit the override code she'd memorized from the schematic. It was a tight fit, smelling of bleach and old food. But it moved fast. She shot past floors, her knuckles white as she gripped the emergency bar. She burst out onto the 23rd floor pantry just as gunfire erupted down the hall. Dante was there, his 2 men down. He was holding one of their pistols, his good hand steady, but he was cornered. 3 of the false NSMD team were advancing. Avery screamed his name. "Dante." He turned, his eyes wide with disbelief. One of the soldiers turned too, surprised by the flank. It was the only opening Dante needed. He fired twice. The soldier dropped. "This way," Avery yelled. She didn't lead him to the stairs. She ran past him to a metal door marked linen chute. She wrenched it open. It was a high-volume service chute, wide enough for a person. Dropping 23 stories to the building's massive laundry and marina dispatch. "You're insane," Dante breathed, clutching his side. "You're bleeding again," she shot back. The other 2 soldiers opened fire. Avery shoved Dante into the chute. He grabbed her wrist, pulling her in with him. It was a chaotic, terrifying slide. They tumbled in the darkness, a cascade of metal, bruising impacts, and the smell of industrial soap. They were thrown out onto a mountain of hotel towels in the basement marina, a tangle of limbs. The air was wet and cold. Alarms were blaring above. "This way," Dante gasped. Taking the lead now, they ran out onto a private floating dock. A sleek, black cigarette boat was waiting. Bishop already at the helm, his face carved from stone. He had anticipated their exit. They scrambled aboard, and Bishop hit the throttle. The boat launched into the black water of the harbor, the Arcadia Center shrinking behind them. Only when they were in the enclosed cabin, the boat skipping violently over the waves, did the adrenaline begin to fade. "They reopened your wound," Avery said, her voice shaking. Dante was slumped against the bulkhead, his face pale, blood seeping through his t-shirt. "It's fine. It is not fine." She was in medical mode now, her fear turning to focused anger. She grabbed the boat's first aid kit. "I have to see it. Take off the jacket." He was just wearing the t-shirt. "We have to lift this." She gently eased the blood-soaked cotton up. His skin was hot. Her fingers brushed the hard plane of his abdomen, then moved to the bandages on his shoulder. They were soaked through. She had to cut them away, Dante hissed as she worked, the boat's motion making it impossible to be gentle. Her hands were on him, bracing herself against the wall, her face inches from his. The small cabin was filled with the smell of the ocean, the sharp tang of antiseptic, and the warmer, darker scent of his skin and dried blood. He was watching her. His eyes narrowed, Not just in pain, but in something else. Calculation, fury, and a raw, unwilling fascination. "You could have died," he said, his voice a low growl. For me." Avery stopped, the trauma shears in her hand. She looked him dead in the eye, her own anger surfacing. "I already bled for you. Dying for you is stupid." She pressed a wad of gauze to the wound, hard. He didn't flinch. "I saved you," she continued, her voice low and fierce, "so you could pay me back for getting me into this. I did not save you so you could die." The engine noise filled the silence. Dante stared at her, and for the first time, his mask of command was gone. He looked utterly, profoundly impressed. No one in his world spoke to him like that. No one lived by that kind of code. He looked back, past her shoulder, at the lights of the Arcadia, now just a bright scar on the skyline. He understood. His half-brother, Jace, had not just attacked his fortress, he had attacked the woman who had saved him. Avery was no longer a complication to be managed. She was the one thing his enemies had identified as his new, singular weakness. Dante made a decision. From now on, she was not just someone to be protected. She was someone to be kept at his side, where he could see her. The Spire was compromised. The Arcadia Center was a kill zone. Dante Serrano needed to disappear, and he took Avery with him. Their destination was not a fortress of steel and glass, but a massive, utilitarian penthouse built onto the roof of the Serrano dry dock, a sprawling, noisy, 24-hour ship repair warehouse. It was the last place anyone would look for a man who owned half the city's luxury real estate. It was loud, smelled of welding ozone and salt water, and was defended by a small army of shipbuilders who owed their livelihoods to Dante. He gave Avery a room adjoining his own makeshift office. It was stark, furnished with function, not comfort, but the single window overlooked the entire working harbor. "I won't stay," Avery said, her voice hard, though she was still damp from the boat ride. Your father is secure." Dante cut her off, his voice clipped with pain from his shoulder. "Bishop moved him to a holding in the West End 20 minutes ago. Jace's men tried to fake a federal raid. They will not stop." He turned to face her, his good hand balled into a fist. "You just saw a team of professionals try to execute me. They were disguised as the NSMD. Going back to Dockview now is not an act of independence. It is suicide, and it will get your father killed." Avery hated that he was right. She hated the cold, iron logic of his world. She sank onto the edge of the cot, her fight draining away, replaced by a cold dread. She was a prisoner of her own good deed. The nights in the dry dock were long. The penthouse was filled with the rhythmic clang of hammers on steel and the hiss of welding torches from the work floor below. Sleep was difficult. Avery watched Dante. He did not sleep. Through the adjoining door, which he left open for security, she saw him work. He was not just a boss who gave orders. He was the entire nervous system of his organization. He was on secure lines, call after call, plugging the leaks Jace had created. He spoke to dock foremen, casino managers, and shipping captains in a coded, precise language. He was rerouting his entire empire in real time, all while nursing a bullet wound that was clearly giving him hell. He was, she observed with a sinking heart, brilliant, and he was getting his hands very, very dirty. On the third night, she found him at his desk at 4 a.m., his face gray with exhaustion, staring at a map of the harbor. A glass of untouched whiskey sat beside him. "You're going to tear the stitches," she said from the doorway. He looked up, his eyes unfocused for a moment before locking on her. "It can wait." "No, it can't. You're favoring it, and you're sweating." She walked to the small medical kit Bishop had left. "Sit on the couch. Take off your shirt." He watched her, a flicker of dark amusement in his eyes. "Giving orders? Miss Kwan, I'm the only one in this room who knows how to properly dress a wound that's been pulled open by a slide down a linen chute. Shirt now," he conceded with a grunt, rising slowly. He unbuttoned the black shirt, his movements stiff. He let it fall from his shoulders. Avery stopped. The original bullet wound from the first night, near his right shoulder, was a violent, healing purple, the stitches tight. But that was not all. His torso was a map of his life. A long, puckered scar ran along his ribs, a knife, old and deep, a fist-sized patch of silvery, melted-looking skin marked his left side, a burn. This man had paid a price for his throne. She stepped closer, dabbing the antiseptic onto a clean gauze pad. The space between them became small, intimate. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin, smell the sandalwood and the faint, metallic scent of his blood. She had to brace her hand on his uninjured shoulder to steady herself. He drew a sharp breath as she cleaned the weeping edge of the wound. His hand came up, not to stop her, but to brace himself, his fingers closing around her free wrist. It was an involuntary reflex, a grip to anchor himself against the pain, skin on skin. Her pulse hammered against his palm in that quiet, the sound of the shipyard below, a dull roar. The air changed. It became heavy, charged. They both recognized it. This was no longer about a debt. This was something else, something far more dangerous. Avery pulled her wrist free, her touch professional but her voice unsteady. "You are a criminal," she said, her voice a low whisper. "I should not be here." Dante did not look away. His eyes were dark, searching hers. "I am a criminal," he replied, his voice just as quiet, "and I am trying to keep you from being murdered for the crime of being a good person. The lines are blurry from where I am standing." "They're not blurry to me," she insisted, tying off the new bandage. "I was going to open a pastry shop on the wharf. I had a whole business plan." He watched her, a genuine, unexpected curiosity in his gaze. "A pastry shop, a small one," she said, finding herself defending the dream. "I would have delivered to the tourist boats by skiff. I was going to call it Harbor Girl. It was clean." "Clean," he repeated, the word tasting strange in his mouth. He looked at her fierce. Clean code in a city built on grime. The moment was broken by Bishop's entrance. He didn't knock. "Boss, news from the forums." "What forums?" Dante asked, not bothering to put his shirt back on. "The dark ones," Bishop said. He looked at Avery, then back to Dante. "Jace is not just hunting. He's outsourcing. A bounty has been posted. Not for you, for her." Avery felt the blood drain from her face. 100,000, Bishop continued, for a confirmed photo and location of the girl who gave Serrano blood. "Jace is feeding her to our rivals. He's using her to smoke you out." Avery felt sick. She was a commodity, a target. Bishop left, the heavy silence returning. Dante stood up, the new bandage stark white against his skin. He walked to the window, looking out at the sparks of the welders below. Avery remained by the couch, trapped. He turned back to her, and all the calculation, all the strategy was gone from his face. He looked tired. He looked, for a second, almost human. "What happens?" he said, his voice low. "If I tell you I want you here, not for strategy, not for protection." Avery's heart stopped. "What if I tell you," he continued, taking one step closer. "It is because I have thought far too much about the girl who ran into the street for me." Avery said nothing. She could not, but she did not look away. He saw her answer. The tension stretched. A wire pulled taut. Avery, needing air, needing to escape the suffocating pull of his admission, turned and walked out onto the small, wind-blasted balcony. The salt spray hit her face. She heard him follow. He did not touch her. He just stood behind her. One step away. A safe distance, an impossible distance, crackling with electricity. Dante was smashing things, not in the main room, but in his private study. Avery heard a glass hit the wall, then the scrape of a heavy desk object being swept to the floor. The bounty on her head had done what the bullets and the ambush had not. It had made him lose control. She walked in without knocking. He was standing by the window, his back to her, his good hand clenched so hard his knuckles were white. "You're angry," she said. "I am compromised." He growled, turning. "My brother is using my own network to hunt a civilian. He's posting bounties. He's making me look weak, and he is going to get you killed. I am blind, Avery. I have eyes everywhere, and I can see nothing." That's because you're looking from the top, Avery said, her voice quiet but firm. You're looking from the penthouse. Your people are all part of the game. They're all compromised by loyalty or fear. I am not. He stopped, his dark eyes narrowing. What are you saying? I'm saying you can't trust anyone in your organization because you don't know who sold you out. But I'm not in your organization. I'm a civilian. I'm neutral. Let me look. Let me go. Go where? Back to your apartment. The bounty is active. No, let me use my network, not yours. She stepped closer, her passion rising. Who is invisible in this city? Dante, who goes everywhere into the high-rises, past the doormen, into the back of the kitchens, into the service elevators of the warehouse districts. Your men in suits know. We do. The kids on scooters, the drivers in food-stained hoodies. We see everything. We are just too poor for anyone to notice. She had his full attention. For the next 48 hours. Avery barely slept. She reactivated her delivery app, not to take runs, but to use the private Dash Chat servers. She put the word out to a dozen trusted drivers she'd run with for years. She didn't ask about gangsters. She asked about logistics. Her request was simple. I'm running point for a new private courier service. We're tracking high-end executive movements to map efficiency routes. Log any private security movements, any black cars, any vans that seem out of place. Log them with a timestamp and a package code. The package codes were simple. A pizza emoji for a single sedan, a burger emoji for a multi-car team, and a cold emoji, a snowflake for any refrigerated or utility truck that seemed to be sitting, observing. The data flooded in. Her friends were bored, they were everywhere, and they loved a game. Her burner phone lit up with a constant stream of coded messages. She and Dante sat in the dry dock penthouse, which she had turned into a makeshift war room, papering a wall with printed maps. She cross-referenced the emoji-laden chat logs with the list of Dante's known movements over the past 2 months. A pattern emerged on the 3rd day. It was faint, but it was there. Here, she said, her finger tapping the map. You went to the South Wharf Casino at 10 p.m. 2 weeks ago. Secret visit, and here. She pointed to a chat log. My friend Marco logged a snowflake at 9:30 p.m. Same location, a refrigerated truck. It was parked for an hour. My people sweep for surveillance, Dante said, dismissing it. They're sweeping for black cars and men with binoculars, Avery countered. Who looks at a food truck? And look here. She traced another line. Your meeting in the financial district, the one Jace knew about, 20 minutes before you arrived, another snowflake logged by a different driver, a North Pier Foods truck. Dante went very still. North Pier Foods is a subsidiary of Serrano Holdings. It's one of mine. Avery was already on Dante's terminal, her fingers flying. She had his password now. She dove into the Serrano Holdings corporate server, a place she had no right to be. She pulled up North Pier's fleet dispatch. The trucks are all GPS tracked, she murmured. She cross-referenced the truck's logs with her driver's sightings. Match, match, match. A North Pier truck was present 20 to 30 minutes before every single one of your secret moves that was compromised, she said, her blood cold. Someone is using your own company to run advanced surveillance on you. Who signed the dispatch orders for those trucks? Dante's voice was dangerously quiet. Avery clicked, pulling up the digital signatures. Her breath caught. It's not your logistics manager. They're all co-signed by Jace Serrano. Dante's face was pale. The betrayal was absolute, but Avery wasn't done. There's something else, she said. The truck's logs. It wasn't just at your locations. It made one other stop. Every single time. A residential address in Bay Meadow. A suburban mansion. Dante frowned. I have no assets there. No contacts. Avery typed the address into a public satellite map, then into the county's public access camera register. There's a community traffic cam on the corner. She hacked into the feed's archive, a simple trick she'd learned to fight parking tickets, and spooled back the footage. There it was, the North Pier truck, parked. And walking out of the mansion's front gate, clear as day, was Jace Serrano. He was not alone. He was walking beside a woman in a sharp, distinctive purple suit, her red hair a slash of color in the sun. "I know her," a voice said. Mara Quinlan had entered the room, holding a tablet. She stared at the screen, her face losing all color. "That," Mara said, "is Alara Wynne, city councilwoman. She's the one who spent the last year pushing for the NSMD to get a charter in Harbor Point." The pieces slammed into place, forming a horrifying picture. Jace wasn't just staging a coup, he was staging a hostile takeover with political backing. He would use the attack on Dante to prove the city's criminal element was out of control, and his partner, Alara, would use her new federal task force, the NSMD, to legally dismantle Dante's empire, leaving the choicest pieces for Jace. Avery looked at Dante. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked shaken. This was not a street fight. This was a war on two fronts, one political, one personal. He could not just handle a popular councilwoman, a brother and a politician, Dante said, his voice hollow. "They are trying to erase me." He looked at Avery, his gaze intense, seeing her in a way he never had before. "If this goes badly," he said, "if I have to go public, testify, or even fake my own death, would you disappear with me? Leave all this?" Avery met his gaze. The man who had been a monster, the man who was her patient, the man who was now something else. "I'm not running," Avery said, her voice steel. "I didn't save your life twice just to watch you lose. I want to see them fall." A small, dangerous smile touched Dante's lips. "Good, then we set a trap." He turned to Mara and Bishop, who had assembled. "We are going to leak a rumor. A massive, untraceable shipment of Congo diamonds is moving through our network, landing at Warehouse 9. The information will be classified at the highest level. Only 4 people in this room will know the exact time and route." He looked around the room at Mara, at Bishop, at Avery. "Jace will get the tip from his usual source, and when he and Wynn's puppet feds raid Warehouse 9 to seize my illegal shipment, they will not find diamonds. They will find every reporter and city official I have on my payroll." He put his hand on Avery's shoulder, a public gesture of ownership and alliance. "Welcome to the war room, Miss Kwan." Mara's eyes were a complex mix of new respect and raw jealousy. Bishop merely nodded once, a faint expression of approval. The girl was, he decided, worthy. To spring the trap, Dante had to be seen. He could not remain a ghost in his own city. He had to reestablish his presence, to show his enemies he had not been weakened. The annual Winter Harbor Fund charity auction was the perfect stage. It was the one night all of Harbor Point's power legitimate and otherwise convened under one roof. Alara Wynne will be there, Dante explained in the dry dock war room. "Jace will be there. They will come to see the ghost. And they cannot see me as the girl from the hospital," Avery said, connecting the dots. "The bounty." "Precisely," Dante said. "You will not be Avery Kwan, the blood donor. You will be my guest." Mara Quinlan, who had been gloomy since the plan was conceived, was assigned to rehabilitate Avery. It was a brutal afternoon. "You are not a delivery driver tonight," Mara instructed. Circling Avery in the penthouse, a rack of designer gowns had been delivered, which Avery found absurd. "You do not slouch. You do not look startled. You do not, under any circumstances, answer any questions about who you are or where you came from. You are with him. That is your entire identity. Do you understand?" Mara's hands were rough as she zipped Avery into a dress, her jealousy a sharp, cold perfume in the air. "He's never brought anyone to this event. Ever. They will all be looking at you. They will all be trying to figure out what you are to him." Mara's eyes met Avery's in the mirror. "Do not make him look weak." The dress was a column of deep blue silk that left her back exposed. It felt like armor and a target all at once. When Avery walked out, Dante was waiting by the elevator, dressed in a custom black tuxedo. He looked like the king of the dark city he was. He stopped his conversation with Bishop and simply looked at her. He looked at her not as a patient, not as a target, but as a man. The silence stretched, and for a moment, even Mara was quiet. He held out his arm. "Miss Quan. They arrived in his private, armored sedan. The moment the door opened, the flash of cameras was blinding. Dante Serrano, who never posed, who never brought a date, stepping out with a stunning, unknown woman on his arm? The message was immediate and powerful. He was not only back, he was thriving. The grand hall of the museum was a sea of black ties and whispers. Avery kept her hand on Dante's arm, her fingers gripping his bicep. She could feel the hard muscle beneath the wool, the solid, living warmth of him. "Breathe," he murmured, his lips brushing her temple, a gesture that looked intimate to the crowd but was pure instruction. "You are with me. No one will touch you." And then they saw her, Ilara Wynne, in a power suit of her signature purple, her red hair a beacon. She approached them, her smile wide and false. "Dante," she cooed, touching his arm. "My goodness, we heard rumors, but I am so relieved to see you looking so robust. You recovered quickly." "I have a resilient constitution, councilwoman," Dante replied, his voice a smooth, cold stone. His arm tightened around Avery's waist, pulling her closer. Ilara's smile did not falter, but her eyes slid to Avery. They were not kind. They were the eyes of an analyst, assessing a new, unexpected variable. "And you must be—" "She is with me," Dante said, ending the conversation. They moved through the crowd. Dante smiled. He shook hands. He bid on silent auction items, all while acting the part of the untouchable boss. Avery stood beside him, her back straight, her expression a careful mask of polite disinterest she'd learned from Mara. She was playing the part so well, her heart hammering, that she began to feel it. She felt the power radiating from him, the invisible wall of fear and respect that surrounded him. As the main auction began and the lights dimmed, Dante's phone vibrated in his pocket. He did not look at it. Bishop, standing in the shadows near an exit, caught his eye and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The trap had sprung. Avery leaned in, her lips near his ear, pretending to whisper something intimate. "What was that?" "Bishop," Dante murmured back, his breath warm on her skin, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. "Warehouse 9. A team with fake NSMD warrants just breached the doors, right on schedule." Jace had taken the bait. He had sent his political attack dog to seize a shipment that did not exist, and Bishop's hidden cameras were rolling, broadcasting it all to the reporters Dante had waiting in a nearby building. Dante was still smiling, but Avery, standing so close, could feel the coiled tension in him. He was a predator, watching his prey walk into a snare, the sheer control it took for him to stand there, making small talk while his world was at war, was terrifying. The night wore on. As the auction wound down, Avery stepped onto a side balcony for a breath of cold, clean air, the noise and the performance wearing her thin. She was about to turn back when she heard voices. Jace Serrano. He looked like a younger, softer version of Dante, but his eyes were weak. He was on the same balcony, further down, confronting his brother who had just stepped out. "You had to do this, didn't you?" Jace hissed, his voice trembling with rage. "You had to show up, make a scene, pretend you are still in control." "I am in control, Jace," Dante said, his voice flat. "She has you on a leash, Ilara. She wants you gone. Not wounded, not retired, gone. I didn't want to kill you. Brother, I just wanted my share." Jace stepped closer, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper Avery had to strain to hear. "But she's right. You live. I lose everything. She will not stop until you are in the ground." Avery's blood ran cold. It was a confession. She slipped back inside, her heart pounding. She found Dante by the bar, now alone. She grabbed his arm, her composure shattering. "Jace, he's on the balcony. He just said it. He said Ilara wants you dead, and he's losing everything." Dante looked down at her, his face a mask. He had just won, but this was the final piece, the proof, the witness. He now had the moral authority, in their dark world, to do what was necessary. They left without a word to anyone, a silent, powerful exit. They didn't speak in the car. They didn't speak on the ride up the private elevator in the spire. The doors slid shut, sealing them in the small, brushed steel box. The silence was deafening. Avery was still vibrating from the night, from the fear and the silk and the confession. The elevator stopped. Before the doors could open, Dante hit the hold button. He turned to her. The penthouse just a few feet away, but in the dim light of the elevator, they were in their own world. "Tonight," he said, his voice low, almost rough. "You were perfect." He stepped closer. Avery had to tilt her head back to look at him. She was trapped between him and the wall, but she made no move to escape. "Thank you," he breathed, his forehead resting against hers. "Thank you for walking into my world without flinching." It was not a command. It was not a performance. He lowered his head, and his lips met hers. It was not the chaste brush of a fake lover. It was a kiss of profound, desperate gratitude. It was slow and deep, and it tasted of whiskey and victory and the impossible, terrifying reality of who they were. It was the first honest thing that had happened all night, and it was not for show. The elevator doors opened into the silent penthouse. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Harbor Point was slick with a light, misting rain. The energy from the elevator, that sudden, breathless kiss, followed them into the room, clinging to the air. The night was not over. It was just beginning. Both of them were vibrating, strung tight as piano wire from the hours of performance, the victory and the confession. Dante moved away first, breaking the spell. He ran a hand through his hair, turning his back to her. He walked to the window, putting the width of the marble floor between them. He looked at her reflection in the glass, the blue silk dress, the flush on her skin. "I have ruined too many lives to ruin yours. Avery." His voice was rough, the sound of a man fighting himself. "What happened in the elevator? It was a mistake." Avery watched his reflection. He was trying to put the walls back up, to become the boss, the criminal, the man who controlled everything. But she had seen the man in the dry dock, the man on the boat, the man who bled. "You are not ruining my life," she said, her voice steady, clear in the quiet room. She walked toward him. "I am not one of your assets you can just dismiss. I chose to get on the boat. I chose to come here tonight. I am choosing to be here now." He turned slowly. He studied her, the delivery driver who had seen the worst of him and had not run. He walked toward her, his steps deliberate, measured. He gave her every opportunity to retreat, to show fear, to break eye contact. Avery did none of them. She stood her ground, her chin up, her gaze locked on his. She didn't move an inch. His eyes searched hers, looking for the confirmation he needed. He saw her breath hitch, saw the pulse beating fast in her throat. That was all the permission he required. He lowered his head and put his lips on hers. The first kiss had been gratitude and surprise. This was something else. This was a claiming. This was the culmination of the linen shoot, the bandage changes, the balcony confession, the pent-up adrenaline of the night, the victory over Jace, the scent of the rain and the salt from the harbor. It all poured into the kiss. It deepened instantly, becoming hot and demanding. His hand, which had been hesitant, moved to the bare skin of her back, the silk of the dress cool beneath his palm. He pulled her flush against him, a low sound in his throat. Avery's hands went up, not to push him away, but to anchor herself. They wrapped around his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. She shifted, her hand brushing the scar on his shoulder, the one she had tended. She felt the muscles in his back tense, a reminder of his recent, unhealed wounds. They moved, a slow, stumbling dance, away from the door and toward the massive sofa that faced the wall of glass. The lights of the cargo ships in the harbor below cast a moving, golden glow over the room, painting their skin in light and shadow. He broke the kiss only to trace a line down her jaw with his lips, finding the sensitive spot just below her ear. Avery shivered, her head tilting back, giving him access. It was a tremor of pure anticipation. He paused, his breath hot against her neck. He was a man of control, and he was seconds from losing it. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his voice thick. "If you are not sure—" Avery's voice was hoarse, barely recognizable. If I wanted to stop, she breathed, I would have stopped in the elevator. A low, rough laugh escaped him. It was a sound of pure relief. Avery, he murmured, and kissed her again, this time with the weight of all the nights he had held back. They sank onto the plush sofa, entangled in the dark blue silk of her dress and the sharp black of his tuxedo. The city lights watched them, a silent audience to the desperate, long overdue collision. His hands were gentle, tracing the line of her spine over the thin fabric, a respectful exploration. Her hands mapped the hard planes of his chest. It was a tangle of long kisses, of breathlessness, of quiet murmurs lost against skin. The sound of the rain against the glass was the only rhythm, matching the pounding in their chests, until the golden lights of the harbor eventually faded into the gray light of dawn. Avery woke first. She was not on the sofa. She was in Dante's bed, and she was wearing his white dress shirt. The blue silk dress was pooled on the floor. She sat up, the cotton soft against her skin, smelling faintly of him, of sandalwood and the night before. The fear she expected was not there. In its place was something sharper. She heard a sound from the kitchen, a sound that did not belong in the world of a mafia boss, the clink of ceramic. She padded out, her feet bare on the cold marble. Dante was there. His back was to her. He was in a clean t-shirt and sweats, his hair damp from a shower. He was making coffee, just making coffee like a normal person. That was the thing that terrified her. The violence, the power, the auction. She could understand that. But this, the domestic, quiet normality, this was the thing that could truly undo her, because she realized, with a sickening lurch, that she wanted this. She wanted this morning to happen again. He turned, a mug in his hand, a small, genuine smile touching his lips when he saw her. "Good morning." The moment was too fragile. It shattered as the private elevator doors hissed open. Bishop stepped out. He did not apologize for the intrusion. His face was granite. "Boss," he said, his eyes flicking to Avery once, then back to Dante. The soft, normal morning evaporated. The king was back on his throne. "What?" Dante's voice was cold again. "Jace has not given up," Bishop said, his voice flat and brutal. "He just made a move. He grabbed a man from a tenement in Dockview, a man named Kwan Sang-jin." The soft, domestic light of the penthouse shattered. Bishop did not hand the tablet to Dante. He placed it on the counter, his face carved from granite. It was a live video feed. Avery, still wrapped in the comfort of Dante's shirt, froze. The screen showed an abandoned warehouse, the air thick with concrete dust. In the center, tied to a rusted metal chair, was her father, Kwan Sang-jin, his face pale with a terror she had never seen. He was flanked by Jace's men, but more terrifyingly, by a team in the black tactical gear of Alara's NSMD unit. Jace Serrano stepped into the frame. He looked strung out, his eyes wide and jittery. "Brother," he said, his voice cracking, "you failed to show up at the trap I set, so I am bringing the leverage to you. Cypress Rail Yard, Warehouse 4, the girl's father." The terms were clear. Dante was to come alone. He was to bring signed papers transferring all Dockland control to Jace, and he was to sign a prepared confession, admitting to the illegal arms smuggling Alara had fabricated, giving her the political justification to cleanse Harbor Point. "You have 2 hours, Jace finished, his voice a desperate whine. After that, Councilwoman Wynn's federal partners discover a hostile situation during a raid. The old man will be declared a tragic casualty. The feed cut. The room was silent, save for the hum of the coffee maker. Dante turned to Bishop, his face a mask of cold fury. The man from the kitchen was gone. The boss was back. "Ready my car. I'm going alone." "No." The word was not a plea. It was a command. Dante and Bishop both turned. Avery was trembling, but her eyes were dry and bright with a rage that eclipsed Dante's own. "You are not," she said, stepping in front of him, jabbing her finger into the center of his chest. "This is my father, my blood, and you are alive because of my blood. You do not get to throw that life away in some noble, idiotic sacrifice. You are not dying for my father. We are doing this smarter." Dante stared at her, momentarily stunned into silence by her ferocity. "What?" Dante finally asked, his voice low. "Is smarter. They are expecting the king," Avery said, her mind racing, clicking into the logistics mode that had kept her alive for years. "They are watching the roads for your armored sedan. For your convoy, they are not looking for the help." She looked at Bishop. "My old delivery van. It's a beat-up white panel van. It is the most invisible vehicle in this city. It's sitting in the Dockview impound. You can get it out." "A van," Dante said, incredulous. "A van," Avery insisted, her voice gaining strength. "Bishop can put thin plate armor in the panels. Just enough. We don't go as a private army. We go as a late delivery." Mara, who had been listening silently, was already at her terminal. "Cypress Rail Yard," Mara murmured. "Their security system is ancient. I can loop the camera feeds, but it is unstable. I can give you exactly 7 minutes. 7 minutes, Avery said, nodding. We go in. We grab my father. We get out. No negotiating with Jace. No signing Alara's papers. Dante looked at the woman in front of him. She was still wearing his shirt, but she had become the general in the room. He saw her will. The same iron that had made her run into the street, that had made her slide down a linen chute. To deny her now would be to break the very thing he admired. He gave a single, sharp nod. "We do it your way." An hour later, Avery was in the driver's seat of her battered, rattling van. It smelled of old cardboard and, now, faintly of welding from Bishop's hasty modifications. Dante sat in the passenger seat, not in a suit, but in dark fatigues, a heavy vest strapped to his chest. Bishop and Mara were in the back, a small arsenal of suppressed weapons between them. The van's engine whined as Avery pulled into the industrial traffic, keeping to the speed limit. She was just another gig worker, invisible. The silence in the cab was thick, heavy with the unsaid. "If this goes wrong," Dante began, his voice quiet. "It won't," Avery cut him off, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "But if it does," she turned to him at a red light, the gray Harbor Point morning making his face look tired. "If we survive this," she said, her voice low and intense, "what happens next? Are you going to keep this throne? Or could you walk away? Could you just leave Harbor Point?" Dante watched the city pass by, the empire he had built on steel and shadow. "This city is in my bones, but Jace is a cancer. Alara is the poison. This is not my empire anymore." The light turned green. Avery accelerated. He turned his gaze to her. "If you go," he said, his voice a vow. "I go." They reached the rail yard. "We are live," Mara whispered from the back. "Camera loop is active. You have 7 minutes." Avery took a deep breath, drove the van right up to the service gate of Warehouse 4. A guard in Jace's colors stepped out, bored, holding a rifle. "Can't you read the sign, 'No deliveries'? I have an urgent medical crate," Avery said, her voice pitched with the exact weary annoyance she used every day. "Priority 1, sign for it." The man sneered and stepped forward. The van's side door slid open. Bishop was a black shadow, and the man was down before he could make a sound. It was the only warning. A shot cracked from a gantry above, sparking off the van's reinforced hood. A sniper. Alara had never planned to let Jace negotiate. She wanted them all dead. "Go, go," Dante yelled, pushing Avery out of the driver's seat. Gunfire erupted from the warehouse doors. The rail yard, a maze of rusting containers, became a kill box. The air filled with the shriek of bullets on steel, all of it lit by the sickly, humming, yellow floodlights. "Bishop, cover Mara, on me," Avery yelled, ignoring Dante. She wasn't running for the front door. She was running for the side. "Avery!" "No," Dante roared. But she was already gone. "I know this place I used to deliver their coffee," she yelled back. She knew what the blueprints didn't. She slid between 2 massive containers, finding what she was looking for, an abandoned, rusted-out container slide that led from the rail yard into the warehouse's sorting room. She dove into the darkness, landing on a pile of debris inside. She saw her father, still tied, his eyes wide with terror. She ran, cutting his bonds with the knife from her boot. "Dad, it's me. We have to go. Now." She hauled him back, shoving him up the slide and into Bishop's waiting arms. Outside, the fight had devolved. Dante had taken the high ground, moving along the narrow iron gantry that connected two container stacks. He was trapped. Jace appeared on the other end of the bridge, his face pale, his pistol shaking. "You ruined it!" Jace screamed, his voice a pathetic shriek over the gunfire. "It was all mine, Alara promised me. She is using you. Jace." Dante yelled back, his own weapon aimed, but he wasn't firing. "She will kill you the second you are no longer useful." "Liar," Jace screamed. He knew it was true. He was desperate, trapped between his brother and his political master. He raised his pistol and just started firing. A wild, sobbing spray of bullets. One shot went wide. A second hit the steel rail. The third struck Dante. Low, in the abdomen, below his vest. Dante staggered. A look of pained surprise crossed his face. He grabbed his side, and his hand came away slick with dark blood. His balance was gone. He pitched sideways, off the gantry, and fell. He hit the gravel 10 feet below with a heavy, final sound. "No!" Avery screamed. She had just seen her father bundled into the van. She turned and saw Dante, unmoving, in the open. The sniper's red laser dot was dancing over his chest. Avery did not think. She ran. She ran from the cover of the van, straight into the line of fire. She threw her body over his, a human shield, just as a bullet cracked the air where his head had been. "Mara, cover!" Bishop roared, unleashing a wave of suppressive fire at the sniper. Avery grabbed the front of Dante's vest, adrenaline giving her a strength she did not possess, and dragged him, bleeding and unconscious, back toward the open door of the van. The van door slammed shut, the sound swallowed by the crack of high-velocity rounds striking the armored panels. Mara at the wheel did not hesitate, flooring the accelerator. The van fishtailed on the wet gravel and shot toward the rail yard exit, a storm of bullets chasing them. "He is bleeding out," Bishop roared from the cargo bay. The vest did not stop at Avery. Having pushed her father into the relative safety of the front passenger seat, scrambled back, Dante was on the van floor, his face a waxy, terrifying gray. The dark, arterial blood was not just seeping, it was pulsing from a wound low on his abdomen, a catastrophic injury. Mara, driving with a focused, desperate precision, glanced in the rearview mirror. "The trauma kit is not enough for this. It is an artery. He will not make it to the safe house." In the corner, Avery's father, Quan Sang-jin, was praying, his voice a panicked, trembling whisper. The van slammed over a pothole, and Dante groaned, his body seizing in pain. Bishop looked at the wound, then at Avery. His face was grim, all options exhausted. His blood type: "We do not have time for a hospital. We do not have a match in the kit." He paused, his gaze locking on hers. "Again, can you do it again?" Avery did not even blink. She ripped the sleeve of her own jacket. "Do it, now." There, in the back of the speeding, rattling van, surrounded by the metallic drumbeat of bullets hitting their tail. The scene replayed itself. It was not the sterile, quiet desperation of St. Lucia Harbor. It was a chaotic, high-speed triage. Bishop, his hands surprisingly steady, prepared the direct transfusion kit. Avery lay down on the cold metal floor of the van, her arm outstretched next to Dante's, as Bishop connected them, the clear tube filled with her warm, crimson blood. Avery's father watched, his eyes wide, as her life began to flow into the man who had brought this chaos. Dante's eyelids fluttered. He was barely conscious, but he felt the change. He felt the warmth. His hand, shaking, found hers, his fingers lacing weakly with hers. "You keep," he rasped, his voice barely audible over the engine. "You keep pulling me from death, Avery!" Avery leaned closer, her own head starting to spin from the blood loss, but her voice was a fierce, unwavering whisper in his ear. "This time," she said, her grip tightening on his, "you are living so we can leave this city. We are leaving. Dante, there is no third time. You live." As they escaped, Bishop's real plan ignited. A secondary team, following his signal, detonated a remotely driven van, an identical decoy at the Harbor Point Bridge. It was a massive, fiery explosion. timed to coincide with a fake tip about a rival gang war. The news, fed by Mara, would later report that a burned body, identifiable only by a custom-made watch recovered from the wreckage, was confirmed to be Dante Serrano. Elara Wynn and Jace Serrano both received the news with triumph. Dante was dead, but their victory was poison, with Dante dead. Elara's bogeyman was gone. Her political justification for the aggressive NSMD task force vanished. The other Harbor Point families, no longer held in check by Dante, saw only weakness. Her power base crumbled in less than a week. Jace, the architect of the rail yard failure, was not rewarded. The real NSMD, responding to an anonymous tip from Mara about the unauthorized use of federal insignia in a violent kidnapping, arrested him. Elara cut him loose, declaring him a rogue element. He was a king for less than an hour. Dante was not in the van. He had been transferred to a hidden, secure medical facility owned by Serrano Maritime, deep in the coastal woods of Maine. Avery did not leave his side. For days. She watched him, pale and still, until the color returned to his face. When he woke, the first word he spoke was her name. The conversation in the van had been a vow. From his hospital bed, Dante gave the orders. He dissolved his empire. The casinos were sold, the shipping lanes turned over. Every illicit asset was liquidated and funneled into a new, single, legitimate entity, the North Coast Logistics Company. It was legally registered, clean and simple. In the name of Avery Kwan, the men he trusted, like Bishop and Mara, were offered management positions, running clean cargo. 1 year later, the city was Greyhaven, a small, drizzling port on the west coast, a place that smelled of pine and cold ocean fog. The sign on the window was new, the paint a bright, defiant yellow against the gray sky. Harbor Girl Delivery Cafe, Avery. Her hair longer, her face fuller and relaxed, wiped down a gleaming espresso machine. The cafe was a front, a beautiful, clean one. The back was a state-of-the-art dispatch center, using her data and experience to manage a network of food, flour, and medical deliveries for the entire region. The bell over the door chimed, letting in a swirl of damp air. Avery looked up. "Welcome in. I will be right." She stopped. A man stood there, his back to the rain. He wore jeans, work boots, and a baseball cap pulled low. His face was clean-shaven, the lines of stress and command gone. He looked normal. He looked, she thought, like a man who had slept well. He was holding a coffee cup, and he looked at her with eyes that were just as dark, but no longer carried the weight of a city. It was Dante. He walked to the counter. They said nothing. He had no guards. She had no debts, and he was just a customer, and she was just a shop owner. And in the silence, they said everything later. As the sun was setting, they walked on the small Greyhaven pier. The fog was rolling in, obscuring the world. "It is cold," Avery said, pulling her jacket tight. She looked at him sideways, a small smile playing on her lips. "Just so you know, if you get shot again, you are on your own. I'm officially retiring as your personal blood bank." Dante stopped walking. He turned to her, and the look on his face was one of profound, quiet gratitude. He reached out, pulling her against his chest, wrapping his arms around her waist, holding her as if she were the only anchor in the world. He kissed the top of her hair. "There will be no next time," he murmured, his voice low and certain. "You gave me 2 lives, Avery. The rest of this one is just to pay you back." He kissed her, and the fog rolled in around them, swallowing the pier, the city, and the past, leaving only the sound of the sea. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from. Please let me know in the comments and share your thoughts on Avery and Dante's journey. Make sure to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.